the idea that far back in the ancient world there were just primitive people is utterly, utterly ludicrous. But if you establish and you reveal publicly in mainstream that they weren't just primitive people, and in fact there was some very, very advanced technological knowledge back there, then the whole house of cards of conventional history starts to fall. You don't want that. As George Orwell said in his book 1984, words to the effect, he who controls history controls the present, and he who controls the present controls history. In other words, if you control the writing of history, you can give people a false fix of where they've come from, therefore giving them a false fix of where they are. That's why the rewriting of history has been so important, and that's why the destruction of historical accounts all over the world has been, and the destruction of them has actually been so important. So I started to go back, and when you realize that back in the ancient world was phenomenal knowledge as well as no knowledge, suddenly some questions start to be answered, some mysteries. And the mysteries are very important, you know. It's great mysteries, because if something comes to light that demolishes your version of life or history, and you say, well, if that's true, mate, what about that? You go, it's a mystery. It's lovely. I just keep it. It's a mystery. Oh, it's a mystery. And you leave it there, because then you can concentrate with your vision of life. And so one of the things that I hear from the academics is that there was just these primitive people in the ancient world. The question, therefore, is, who built these buggers then? Simple question. What the academics say, you'll say, because, you know, we academics also. We academics of universities like Cambridge and Oxford and British Columbia, you know, we're very, very clever, you know, very bright indeed, very bright. And we've had a discussion, you'll say, and we've come to the conclusion, you'll say, that these pyramids were built like this, you'll say. These pyramid things, you'll say. What they did, you'll say, is they built these ramps, you'll say. No, I'm not kidding. They built these ramps, you'll say. I know they had to use as much stone to build the ramps as they did the pyramids, but we don't go into that because it gets a bit complicated. They built these ramps, you'll say, and then they pushed their stones, their little stones, yes, 270 tons, some of them, quite right, up their ramps, you'll say, and they built their pyramids. Very clever, but very primitive, right? There is enough stone staring at you to build 30 Empire State Buildings. There is enough stone to build a wall around the entire perimeter of France, which is a friggin' big country. There's enough, or the stone in the Great Pyramid weighs around 6.5 million tons. The idea that primitive people built that is off the flippin' planet. This is Peru, right? 440 tons this sodding thing is. I mean, Bill and Fred down the builder's yard have moved that in, haven't they? Oh, come on, Fred, bit more. 440 tons. And when you look at the way that these ancient structures all over the world, and interestingly, the older the structure, the more amazing it is. Obviously, some knowledge was lost the nearer we got to the modern world. I mean, I've only seen some of these documentaries recently, which is not exposing the manipulation, but just looking and asking the question, who the hell built these things? But they've shown that this phenomenal workmanship and the techniques are found all over the world. There was some kind of global knowledge way back in the ancient world. I mean, you know, Fred and Bill have hit this with an hammer, haven't they? Look at it. I mean, it's just magnificent. That's just one stone. This is a place called Baalbek in the Lebanon. To build this, they had to put 3 chunks of stone, they're called the trilithon, each of which weigh 800 tons in this structure, and this one's 20 foot high up in a wall. There's another one that's 1,000 tons, which, so I read, is about 3 jumbo jets. Primitive people did this. When you keep going through, this is, if it bloody changes. Someone sent me this. This is from a temple in Egypt, an ancient piece of artwork. And what you've got are the ancient Egyptians lining up here to give a gift and offering sheep and stuff to their god. And when you get to the end of the line and you see what the god looks like, well, it's kind of very strange. It's not what you think the god would look like. And when I started scanning around, there's not that many absolutely literal depictions of reptilian figures, reptilian gods, but there are some. What Credo Mutwa told me is that the Chitahuri, which incidentally in Black African translates as the children of the serpent, the children of the python, which is what they call these bloodlines. He said because they were reptilian, they said, as I said earlier, never depict us as we really look. So the symbolism of the snake, the symbolism of the serpent became depictions of the gods. But you can find some